Expectant parents often imagine carrying a healthy newborn through the front door and cherishing the early days and weeks of getting to know their new family member. But for parents of premature infants, such homecomings can seem like an impossible dream.
I knew something was wrong, but it was such an emergency. I was like, I can't wait. I've got to go now, to the emergency room. And so when I went to the emergency room, they knew immediately. I said, I'm pregnant, my water's broken, and they didn't think I would make it because they put me in a labor and delivery lounge. And they checked to make sure it was amniotic fluid, and it was. And they kind of were just waiting to see, was I going to miscarry? Because that would be a common time if there was going to be a miscarriage. It could go like 17 to 20, 22, 23 weeks. And so it was very scary. It was very scary. And I lasted a couple of days, and then I went to antepartum. And I was on complete bed rest, and I was in antepartum for 2 weeks.
Emma Bailey was stunned to find herself only 22 weeks into a seemingly normal pregnancy, facing the early delivery of her child. A child she says medical experts at that point did not expect to survive.
The doctor kept saying the farther you get along, the more likely the baby will survive. But if the baby's born, we can't stop the baby from being born, but there's only maybe a 3% chance that the baby will survive.
Emma had a textbook first pregnancy years earlier when she gave birth to her first daughter, but this time was different.
It started as a typical pregnancy, but my number one concern was I was older. I was pregnant, I was 38. No one in my family ever had a preemie. No one has had any difficulties with births. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. All of us were born on time, and it was very shocking.
She said her first reaction was to punish herself, wondering if she had somehow caused the crisis. But soon she realized that blaming herself did not change the situation, so she decided to control what she could by doing just as the doctor instructed and making the best of it.
So sometimes it would be like it was a slumber party because I would be in the hospital bed, my husband would be there, and my daughter would be there too. And it was just that those were things that made a difference in how strong you could be and how you could survive. Our faith and the ability to have your family around you, your support system that you had, is what kind of kept you hanging on.
When her daughter was born, after 24 weeks of development, her eyes had just unfused. Her fingernails were barely detectable, and her ears were not fully developed. She weighed a mere 1 pound, 1 ounce.
When I first saw her, it's hard to even think how to describe, because it's like she is a baby, but she's so small that it's hard to even think this is a human being. She's so small, she's so tiny, and there are so many things connected to her. And even though you love her so much, you couldn't help but think, is she gonna survive? I kept thinking, is she gonna die? Will she know that she was loved, even if she existed for a moment? Will she know how much we loved her, how much we love her? I remember the first time we got to see her face, because she had so much tape and the vent and everything else on her, you couldn't really see her. And the other thing was, you're starting to recognize her personality. From the very beginning, she was a real fighter. They had her wrapped up in this little snuggly thing, which keeps her tight and makes her feel like she's still in the womb. And she would always kick one leg out. They would wrap her up, she'd kick that one leg out. When she would do that, you would say, oh, she knows what she likes, she knows how she wants to be. And the nurses would, encourage you to recognize things like that let you know, this is a baby, this is your baby.
Medical technology gave this tiny baby a fighting chance for survival, but it also isolated her from her parents and made bonding challenging.
And I would go there early in the morning, like 9 or 10, and I would stay till about 11 at night. So we were up there a lot. And it made a difference, because we kept having that thought of, if anything happens, I don't want her to die by herself. One of the things they did from the very beginning, they took pictures of us and they put it inside the isolette. So it's kind of like, she might not have been able to see it, but our presence was there. The very first time I got to touch her, it was so scary because they said you have to be very gentle. And what it made me think of was like a baby bird that falls out of the nest, when you're walking by sometimes and they're very pink and you look and you can see their organs. And when it happened, that was the first time when you felt her, and I put my arm around her and she was just so limp in my hand, just so limp and just so light, like a handkerchief or a washcloth, like holding a cloud or something. She was that light. But her mouth was moving, her eyes were moving, and that's when I realized this is my baby.
They also told us, even like going to see her for the first time and everything, you can't be too scared or nervous, because if you are, your negative energy can go into her and it make things difficult. Because, just like we couldn't touch her for the first 2 weeks. Now, a parent not being able to touch your child, that's like the worst thing ever.
In time, Emma and Ed came to marvel at the strength of their daughter, whom they named Danny, that she could be so small and yet have such a will to survive.
She had a ventilator, she had a heart monitor, she has to be garbage fed. Even to get her, like intravenous, so they can give her medicine and things like that, her veins are so small that there are specialized nurse practitioners, neonatal nurse practitioners, that have to be the ones to be able to even find the veins because they're so tiny. So it's just highly specialized, highly specialized. There's even a dietitian that has to figure out what are the nutrients that are going to work to keep her going. And then the thing was, once she started to grow, she would outgrow her blood supply. And so she would have to get transfusions.
It was a blue light that they would put over the baby. That was pretty much like, that was it. Like, if that light came in and got over the baby, you knew that was like, they come in, preachers, and they'll give you a last rites and stuff. We came in that day, and she wasn't in there, and they put her in another room, and my wife was like, okay, what's going on here? Where's the baby at? And they put her in another area, because she was progressing so fast that they had took her to a whole nother area, and I was just like, whoo, she missed the blue light.
They tried to get the parent involved from the beginning with the baby. They use this type of developmental care where they try to cluster when there's going to be interaction with the baby, because she was so small that even to touch her could send her into shock and make her die.
Danny remained in the hospital for 2.5 months, and when she finally got to go home, her parents were apprehensive about taking their tiny miracle out into the world.
After 73 days, when she came home, she weighed 3 pounds 7 ounces. So it took all of 73 days for her to get to that size, and that was very tiny. The only day I really, really cried was the day we came home. And the reason I really, really cried on that day was because I was just thinking, can I remember everything? They teach you as you go along how to do things, what to look for, what to watch, but there was always a nurse there.
And I'm holding her, and I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. And that was one of the times I think I really did, like, bond with her, like, this is my daughter. Oh, my goodness. I would do anything. A hurricane come here right now, wouldn't a gust of wind touch you, because Daddy got you. So that's, I think, one of the times when I really, really did. Like, when I could hold her and touch her, it's like, this is part of me. I got you. Don't worry about it, little one. So
They admit their greatest challenge now is not being overprotective of this strong little girl. The only lingering consequence of her premature birth is the need for one-on-one help with speech development to improve her clarity. Danny is slight at age 3, but not unusually small, and they know how fortunate they are for their daughter's progress.
I'm still friends with people we met at the hospital, and almost all of the other babies have a lot of involved issues. Because of the oxygen situation, because of the lung situation, there can be so many things that, are long-term, but our baby, she just doesn't have those. This experience, it gave me an opportunity to give back to other people, because we had never talked to anybody who experienced it before, and we wanted to let other people know this can happen to anybody, but it's survivable. Your baby is your baby. No matter how or what goes on, that is your baby, and your job is to love, to care, to nurture.
3 years later, Danny is a bright, spunky little girl, oblivious to her precarious start. It's a huge relief for her parents and affords them time now to reflect on how other families might benefit from their experiences.
It is very important that all different kinds of families be embraced in this situation, because I did see some families who had different stressors than I did. And I think relationships with young parents are very important, and relationships with non-traditional mothers are very important. I think it's those relationships that help you get to the point where you can talk about the things that contribute to preterm labor, like smoking, like obesity.
All of these realizations have contributed to Emma's decision to become a neonatal intensive care nurse. She says the impact of her interactions with doctors and nurses and other families made her realize this is the best way for her to spend the next chapters of her life, helping people at some of their most vulnerable times. She wants to do everything possible to foster similar favorable outcomes for others. But there's the reality. Half of babies born as early as Danny do not survive, and 40% have moderate to severe disabilities. This mother and father know without a doubt Danny is one lucky girl.